this is something that you have to do and keep Irving, even though he might leave next year.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only thing that would help me think about keeping Hayward, just because, with Rozier and with Smart, you kind of have point guards there. But Kyrie is a champion, right? He's young, and he's shown us that he can perform well in the playoffs. So, I mean, you can't put his name on there, knowing especially that you put his name on there, he's going to be the first one gone. So, yeah, you have to keep Kyrie there. Okay, then we're going to do Philadelphia. This to me was the easiest three to choose. You're going to keep Simmons, Fultz, and Embiid, just because, obviously some people might say, oh, why would you keep Fultz? He was the first-round pick. You traded up for him. You're going to keep Markelle Fultz.
Yeah, I think that's a no-brainer, too. And then the fourth one, you have Covington, you have your new rookie, Zaire Smith, but I think it's pretty obvious you keep Sarge here. I think Sarge is younger than Covington. And, yeah, he might have looked lost sometimes last year, but I think the potential is there, and especially him being the fourth best player on the team really makes it that much easier for him to develop as a player and really puts less pressure on him to continue to develop. And he did have a lot of good moments, just as many as he had bad moments last year. So I think it's pretty easy that you keep him in the situation.
Yeah, obviously, JJ Redick's the other one, but JJ Redick's just old, and you gotta trust the process and keep the future, right?
Yes.
Now we're gonna talk a little bit about Washington, and these three were very easy for me. They're all young, or relatively young. You're going to keep John Wall, Bradley Beal, and Otto Porter.
Yeah, and then the fourth one, you have Dwight Howard, you have Markieff Morris there, but I think you got to keep Kelly Oubre in the situation. You can't let him walk away for nothing. So I think this one's pretty obvious too, even though he plays the same position really as Bradley Beal, but you have to keep him, and if anything, use him as trade bait.
And I wouldn't be worried about, Dwight Howard and his attitude going to a expansion team, because that'd just be terrible and in the locker room. Okay, this is going to be an interesting little one, because they kind of similar to Utah. They have some top talent, but then they have a lot of good role players, which is Toronto. You're obviously going to keep Kawhi and Kyle Lowry, because, these are your two all-stars. And then the last player I decided to put down would be OG Anunoby, just because, he's young, he showed us what he can do, and I wouldn't want to let him go.
Yeah, so that leaves us with Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam to choose between. They do have other guys like, I'm sure they'd love to get rid of Ibaka, Valanciunas. They do have Danny Green there, but, oh well, if you do have to let him go. But, yeah, I probably think Fred VanVleet is the one to keep here. Even though him and Lowry do play the same position. Lowry is, 34 at this point, 33 or 34, and I think it's pretty obvious that, you have to have something ready once Lowry either goes to another team or retires. You have to have someone ready to take over his position.
Yeah, this is one of those unfortunate things, knowing that if whoever you don't pick is probably going to go, right? A team's going to take Siakam, or a team's going to take VanVleet. But, I think VanVleet has shown us, especially if you look at his stats and, numbers in the playoffs, he's just a really good player. So you keep him for sure, just because of the talent that's there.
Yeah, and they proved how much they want him by resigning him to put them well over the luxury cap this upcoming year. So they proved how much they wanted to keep him.
And here's a team that's also loaded with talent that it was just so hard to come up with these names. But Cleveland Cavaliers, the first two, you're obviously going to keep Colin Sexton, just because he just chose him this year, and people are raving about him. And then you're going to keep Kevin Love, who you just gave all that money to, and who you want to put the team behind Kevin Love. The third person I wrote down is Larry Nance. Now, of course, that's, if somebody wants to disagree with me here, I'm all for it. And, coming up with the fourth player was quite difficult as well. So what are your thoughts?
No, I think I agree. Obviously that roster is what it is at this point. And by the way, resigning Kevin Love and giving him the money they gave him, I think this probably will be the worst contract in the NBA over the final 3 years of that deal.
Well, there's the Blake Griffin contract.
Yeah, but I think Blake Griffin is a little more valuable to the Pistons than Kevin Love will ever be.
40s?
It might be, it might not be. I'm not even sure at this point. I mean, Griffin's only got 4 years remaining on his contract, and now Kevin Love has 5 because the 4 year was an extension to the final year of this contract. But I still think, regardless of what it is, I think Blake Griffin is a better talent, and especially, I mean, both of them have injury histories, but I don't know what Cleveland was thinking with this deal. I have no idea. Even if you wanted to extend them, fine, but to give him that amount of money, I mean, that's $30 million a year for a Kevin Love who's already 30, I believe, and he'll be 35, making, I believe, like $35 million or something. So I don't know what they were thinking, but they did it. They obviously want to keep him. First of all, I thought they should have traded him right when they could. But regardless of what happens, I mean, it is what it is at this point. But I think the fourth player to keep here is Jordan Clarkson. I mean, I don't know who else. I mean, Rodney Hood will probably resign. They did just reportedly agree to a deal with David Nwaba. So between Clarkson and Nwaba, who do we want to keep here?
I dislike Jordan Clarkson. If even if he's the fourth player, I would just leave it.
Put Nwaba on the list.
I would rather keep Nwaba because I did like Nwaba. I did like, I mean, obviously he's a role player, right? So he's not. I am not trying to say he should be starting, but I liked Nwaba and I liked the role he played with the Bulls off the bench. So I would rather keep him than Clarkson because Clarkson to me is not worth keeping. Okay, we're gonna do Miami Heat now. The Heat are gonna protect Justice Winslow, Goran Dragic, and Bam Adebayo.
Yeah, so with the Heat, I mean, who else do they have? They have Wayne Ellington played pretty well. Dion Waiters was injured for some of the years. He played pretty well. Who else do they have? They have James Johnson there.
Tyler Johnson, who they're trying to trade.
Yeah, Tyler Johnson they're trying to trade, but I think
Josh Richardson.
Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious here. You want to keep Josh Richardson. He's still young. He's a solid 3-and-D player. I just put it that way. He put up some real nice defensive numbers. He averaged 1.5 steals a game, almost a block a game. Shot the 3-ball pretty well.
38%. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So I think he's worth keeping. He is still young, so it's pretty cut and dry that you want to keep a guy like that. And I believe
he's under a decent contract, like $14 million. I could be wrong on that, but I believe he's under like $14 million. I think Josh Richardson's obviously the player to keep here, just because of how he can be used in today's NBA is pretty important.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're going to talk about the Orlando Magic, and this is going to be the biggest or the tallest three that we're going to keep. We're obviously going to keep Mohamed Bamba, who was the number 6 pick this year. You just re-signed Aaron Gordon, and Aaron Gordon showed that he has some talent. And Jonathan Isaac, who was their pick last year, who barely played last year, but people, from what I've heard, he was probably the most surprising player in Summer League this year. People are just saying, you got to watch out for this guy. He's long. He's 6'10", I believe. He's got a decent shot. I liked him last year in the draft, and I don't believe Orlando would want to get rid of him.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious that they'd have to keep him. And looking at the remainder of their roster, I mean, the 3 guys really you could choose between here are Fournier, Jonathan Simmons, who they stole from the Spurs last year, and Vucevic. But as much as I like Vucevic a lot, but he struggles with staying on the court, and they've been trying to trade him this year. So we're not going to add him to the list. So it's between Simmons and Fournier. Now, Fournier has some injury history too, but he's a good shooter, and he's a little more talented than Jonathan Simmons. So I think at this point you keep Fournier over Simmons.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think Jonathan Simmons is a little bit of a better defensive player, but from what we've still seen, he still hasn't been able to develop a shot. And I think Fournier is a little bit younger. I think he's like 4 years younger. So I think he's just a guy to keep. Obviously, the guys I named are all big guys. So you don't need to keep Vucevic because of just, you're going to run out of space from where you can play these guys.
Yeah, and I mean, they've been trying to trade him. And I wouldn't be surprised. He probably will be traded sometime in the midseason.
All right, then we got the Atlanta Hawks. You're going to obviously keep Trae Young. You're going to keep John Collins or Josh Collins?
John Collins.
John Collins. And then you're going to keep Taurean Prince.
Yeah, so those are the three young players. I think at this point they have no choice but to keep these three guys. I mean, those are really they're the players they can rely on most if they believe they're going to win in the future. And then also on this roster you have Dwayne Dedman and Kent Bazemore, who I'm sure if makes they're pretty much. Kent Bazemore's been rumored to be traded. I mean, there have been rumors about him going to Houston. I think that would be a solid pickup for the Rockets, but we'll see if that trade ends up going through. But I would say you do keep Bazemore over Dwayne Dedman just because of the fact that he's got trade value. And if he does decide to stay, he's a pretty talented 3-and-D player on this roster. So if anything, he could help the younger players grow if needed. So
Yeah, I mean, Kent Bazemore, like, I think, you can probably get one of the Rockets picks in the future, so you do.
I mean, you would have to, especially taking on Ryan Anderson's contract. They would have to throw in at least the first round pick and probably
from what I've been told, they're the same year, so the money's kind of going to even out, but you're going to get at least a contract out of it. I mean, at least a pick, because you don't have to trade Bazemore, right?
Yeah, both of them do have 2 years left on their contract. So, yeah, I mean, Bazemore even makes a little less. So you'd be taking on a little more money as Atlanta. But yeah, at the same time, Bazemore is much more valuable than Ryan Anderson.
And the Rockets have every reason to pursue a trade like that because that's the only way they get better is, by they can't sign someone and get better. Okay, we have the New Jersey Nets. We thought maybe
Brooklyn Nets.
Brooklyn Nets, my bad. We have
they could keep Van Horn and Kerry Kittle.
Right? Richard Jefferson, Kenyon Martin. Jason Kidd and Vince Carter, right?
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, what we're going to keep here is we're going to keep D'Angelo Russell, Spencer Dinwiddie, and Jared Allen.
Yes. So those are the guys that they are pretty high on at this point. They like them all, even though D'Angelo Russell will be interesting to see what happens with his free agency next year. And I think it's pretty interesting that trade is looking much better for the Lakers now than it is for Brooklyn because I mean, as talented as Russell is, he doesn't seem to fit in anywhere he goes. At least the second team he's with right now doesn't seem to fit in a lot. I believe it was, regardless of which one of those picks it was, I think it was Josh Hart, but I think it actually might have been Kyle Kuzma. It was Kuzma. So, yeah, I mean, Kuzma's looking like a better player than D'Angelo Russell, and they got rid of Mozgov. So that real deal is looking real good now for the Lakers. But back on track, I think the fourth player to keep here is Carl Levert. He's another young player for them, another player that they like. So I think you keep him and see what happens with him on the roster. And if they lose anyone else, I think they would be okay with it.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree with that. I mean, the other person that I thought about maybe is you just don't go for you leave D'Angelo Russell off, but I mean, he's still the one that has the most potential here, so you're kind of stuck with having to.
Yeah, you got to give him one more year to see what he does for the team and see how he develops with the roster.
Okay, so now we are going to move on and we're going to discuss the New York Knicks. You're obviously keeping, I think this was pretty easy. You're going to keep Porzingis, you're going to keep Frankie Ntilikina, and you're going to keep Kevin Knox.
Yeah, and the rest of the roster, really, there's no other young guys there. They had, I mean, probably if we went back last year, they had Kyle O'Quinn, and Hernan Gomez at the center position. Both of them are gone off the team now. You have Cantor there. You have Lance Thomas, Emmanuel Mudiay, who I think is an absolute joke. I don't see why you would keep him. So I think at this point you keep Courtney Lee, use him as a trade chip if you have to. But I think he's their best option, and I think the Knicks are trying to win this upcoming season, even though Porzingis might be out for the whole year. So I think you do keep Courtney Lee, and if the Knicks are losing by the trade deadline, you use him as a trade chip.
Okay, that's fine. I don't have any other player on the team where I'm very much going to try to, make a case for here. Okay, so now we have Michael Jordan's team. We have the Charlotte Hornets, and I think, for him, you're going to protect Malik Monk, who was your draft pick last year, who showed some talent. You're going to protect the draft pick you traded for this year from the Clippers. You're going to protect Miles Bridges. And I still think Kemba Walker still has that awesome contract, at least for a year. He's still a good trade asset. I mean, I know that the Hornets are intent on keeping Kemba Walker. If he's going to stay, that's another thing. But you keep him just because of the trade value he has, and if he does stay, he's still a good player.
Yeah, I don't know why he would want to stay. I mean, I could